haven't tried it yet, but I read the all of the ingredients and what's in it, and I thought I had the packet next to me, but I'm
I think this is one of my staples.
really,
It's a strong one, and it's one of my favorites because I don't know, it's just different.
so are you drinking the same tea?
Uh-huh.
It's so freaking good.
You like it?
Yeah, I really do. I love like a
Yeah.
little bit of like, I don't know, like a, I don't even want to say it's a sour flavor. I think it's the lemongrass or the lemon
Mm-hmm.
balm. But like when there's always a word for it and I always blank on the word.
Acidic.
Just a strong, yeah, maybe that's the word. Just a strong
Well,
flavor.
I'm happy you like a strong, but some people don't, and I tell people like
I love it.
some of them are really more medicinal
Right.
as well. Like especially there's one I have for respiratory, and then one for that's going to be just for like teeth and oral stuff that I've
Yeah.
used, and I'm like that shit is strong.
Yeah.
So like
That makes
it's
sense.
made to be medicinal on purpose. Like there's a whole
Good.
protocol with it that I've done because I had an infection that I got rid of
Hmm.
doing that protocol.
Right.
So I'm like, it is meant to be strong and it's not for the faint of heart, but it
Right.
works.
Also, the
So,
ashwagandha has saved my life recently. Once I realized what I was
ah,
utilizing, I just was trying to figure out my cortisol, stress, everything. And I started taking ashwagandha and it
what's that?
changed
I was like,
everything.
what is that music?
As a host, gave
Ah,
drinks right here.
I can only have it minimally because it's nightshade and I
Mm.
have lupus. So
Shoot.
yeah, so I can only have like a very, very small amount of it. I don't know. I took it for a while and I couldn't tell the difference. So I
I
was like, I don't know
sometimes I
if
wonder
it's
if it's kind of a placebo effect and I'm just making it up, but I'll take it. It's working. It's working for me. It's fine.
I think everything works. I'm sure for some people, like they feel ashwagandha like working for them. For
Hmm.
me, it was one of those things where I was like, I mean, I don't know, but typically my demeanor is pretty like fine, and so
Right.
I was like, I feel like I need a big energy boost. Whereas I take GABA,
Right.
and I love that amino acid, and if I take GABA, I do feel a difference.
Right.
If I take two of those, I'm like walking on sunshine.
I don't think I'd even tried GABA before or
I
catnip,
highly
honestly.
catnip is great to relax.
My cats love
One of my
it.
yeah, cats love it, but for us it's the opposite effect. So we
Oh,
just chill out. Valerian root also smells like ass, but you chill out.
the tea like itself smells so good.
I think
Maybe
it's a
it
lemongrass. I
must
think the
be,
lemongrass really counteracts the ass smell of the valerian.
right?
Because I take it as well as like capsules to go to sleep sometimes,
Right.
and it really does knock you out. It's better than melatonin because you're not going to get bad dreams and stuff. But uh,
I've been
it
taking
smells
melatonin
terrible.
again, and I've been having weird, crazy dreams. And I'm like, is it
Yeah,
just
that's
melatonin?
melatonin. Melatonin does that.
I just stopped smoking marijuana, which also might be a part of that as well. To mix, and my dreams are so specific, and I remember them all the time. But
I
now that
love
I'm
that.
remembering them, and I change whatever supplements I'm on, whatever I'm taking to go to bed. It totally
Yeah,
affects everything.
you should
Uh,
write them down.
Noticed. I have been. I'm a lucid dreamer. It's the best thing that ever happened to me.
Oh, I
Honestly.
love that. Well, it's definitely the melatonin because
Yeah.
people. I used to have that, and that's why I stopped taking it because I used to. I didn't feel rested. I was like, I'm
I,
sleeping, but my brain is so active that I do not feel rested when I
mm,
get up. And then I had an old boss. He was like, "Oh, don't take melatonin. Take like this different sleeping agent." And then I'm just like, I was like, I don't like this, but valerian is fantastic. So this one is great too because you can take it before bed. And I
mhm.
would just say do more of a tonic
Right.
to juice less water, and you should knock out pretty swiftly. That's how a really like restful, like easeful night. Because you're making
So
all of these life changes.
trying. I feel like I hit a barrier where I had to make the life changes. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel good. I didn't feel bad. I just didn't feel great. And I was like, what can I change within just my routine? The very small changes that I can kind of sustain because I'm a quitter. I'm a big quitter if I don't do very small baby steps at a time. And so I think just the smoking less, drinking less caffeine, just kind of finding alternate methods to
You're a
feel better.
runner.
And I'm a runner, but that's also kind of a new thing as well. I've probably only been running for like a year and a half, seriously for a year, and that's totally anxiety. I like
Gotcha.
running. At first, it was like for health, and then now it's like I wake up and if I don't run in the morning, I just feel completely different throughout the day. So I mean, it's the best. I keep saying it's the best thing I ever did for myself, but I made a lot of changes recently that it
That
turns
works out.
out taking care of yourself is tough, but it changes everything.
Oh, well, I love that. It's been inspiring. Like you literally got me thinking about how I should start like jogging a bit
It's
and like run. And I'm like, I like to sprint.
right,
I stopped drinking coffee like last week. I wasn't a big coffee drinker. I just went through like a month and a half spell
right,
of liking it again. I'm
right.
a tea drinker. So it was just, but I noticed my energy. I was like, yo, I'm so sluggish. I'm dead like midday. And then I need another coffee. And I kind of feel like shit because I'm also having sugar now in
Exactly.
it. And I don't drink my tea with sugar. So it was just like this. My skin's different now. It's just like, thank you. But you know, when you notice, you're like, there's texture here that was
Right,
not there
right.
before, and it's just not as vibrant. It's not glowy, whereas when I'm drinking teas and like
Mhm.
working out consistently and doing all these things, it
Right.
just like you like feel such a shift in my being that
Mhm.
I am more vibrant as a person, whereas like this last month, threw me off and my whole routine went out the window, and
Right.
so it really changed everything.
I think it was a big part as well of trying to get back to the basics of
Mm.
I was putting so many different substances, caffeine, marijuana, nicotine in my body all the time. And I was just trying to figure out who I am with nothing and how to operate at that level because I would wake up and immediately drink coffee and I would be racing and I
Mm.
would crash midday and I would need something else. And I just was so reliant and so dependent on so many different things. If I was feeling one way, I would do something or I would take something. And I think I really just wanted to get to a point where I felt, and I don't think it's like unhealthy to do those things. I think it's to each their own. But I wanted to feel, I guess, clean. I guess fresh would be the word that I would use. I wanted to see who I was at the base of everything.
Mhm.
And I really, it's a work in progress, and I definitely lapse from time to time.
Yeah.
But I really, it changed so much for me. And it just, people have been telling me for a very long time, oh, just start running, just start doing this. And you really have to choose it for yourself. And I think I just hit the point where, to be honest, I was so low, I had no other choice but to make some changes. And I did. And I'm grateful that it was a long process. It's probably been a year and a half since I started even thinking about it. But I just got to a point of no return and I was like, I need to make these changes just to
Mhm.
see it for myself as well, not even for anyone else, just to see who I could be and show up for myself. I actually keep a
Oh.
photo. I just took a photo of it, but I keep a photo of my younger self on the mirror next to my door in my bedroom. And I wake up in the morning and I'm like, that's right. I'm doing this for you. You would be proud of me. And that's me being proud of myself. And yeah, just figuring out who I can be and being the version that I want to, I
I love
suppose.
that. Yeah, you step into your highest self. That because I think that's been the mindset shift. Um,
Mhm.
I love that I've gotten to know you for so long, and yet it's been at this sort of distance. You're also an executive and a producer, and so it's been really amazing to know you like outside of that. And I'm sure it does come into play. Of course, we're going to go into like the intersections, but it's been such a beauty to just know you as Shanice, and then not as the Shanice as like the executive, the producer. So it's just really been wonderful, and I'm really happy you're here.
Thank you. And I just want to say, I was thinking about this morning. I just think it's so important not only for this space to have these conversations and to have open and honest conversations. I know we've talked recently and it immediately goes into kind of let's trauma dump and talk about it, but I think it's so important to be able to have space to have those conversations and Shanice the executive and Shanice the person, there's just no separation. There is separation, I'm lying. It's like I need to have these conversations to be able to step into that role as an executive, as a producer. And I'd like to think that I operate from a place of honesty, I suppose. When I see that somebody wants to have a conversation, I'm like, cone of silence. What do you need to talk about? How can we? Because I think we're all going through so much of a similar thing. And I think that's such a big, I mean, the human level that you can reach underneath the kind of job, the kind of, productivity element of everything is so important. And it's important to have those conversations. So I'm grateful to you for having those and to making space for us to have those. So thank
Oh,
you.
it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
One,
There is only one question that I ask everyone, and that is, what is your purpose?
starting with the easy stuff, I'm glad. How many words do I have? I would say,
You can say it as short or as long as you want.
I would say to use one word, and this is going to sound a little cheesy, but anyone who knows me will agree that this word kind of encapsulates how I feel about everything and my everything that I'm here to do on earth. My purpose is love, and that comes in all forms: friends, family, career, someone who can be there for other people when people do that for me. It's like that's the purpose of being here in my professional opinion, unprofessional opinion. But yeah, I guess my purpose is, especially in my time here, just in general, I think my purpose is just to meet and find and connect with as many souls as I can, because I just really think that's the purpose of why we're all here. I don't know exactly what that means. I guess it's a spiritual, conversation to have, but I think that would be the purpose. And it comes into my life so often, that purpose, that I know it must be in all forms as well. I'm so grateful I'm the person, I'll ask you about your relationship. I'll ask you if you're happy is my main question that I'm asking people. And I think that, people light up when they find someone who feels the same way. And I light up when I find someone who feels the same way. So my purpose, and it carries over into everything that I do, is creating. And I think a part of creating is loving to create. And so I think that love would kind of encapsulate the mission, I suppose, that I have and the journey that I'm on.
I love that. We spoke about earlier how you're stepping into your highest self, and I wonder then, since love is your mission and love is your purpose, how or what are a few ways in which you love yourself and you show love to yourself?
Tough questions. I think in the context of my life, I am on a journey to love myself. I think I am my harshest critic. And I think oftentimes, and it's something that I've been learning very recently, in the ways that I am making sure that everyone around me feels loved, I realize that I don't reciprocate for myself. And so I think taking care of myself is a way that I've been learning to love myself. I think that speaking kindly to myself is a way that I've been learning to love myself. The picture in my bedroom of me at 7 or 8 that I see every morning when I wake up, I just remember, if I'm being mean to me, I'm being mean to her, and she's a good person, and I'm trying to be a good person. And so I think I think it all comes back to self-awareness and not putting the pressure on, and not my worth doesn't come from my productivity, and it doesn't come from who likes me and who values me. I've had to learn to find that value within, and that comes from taking care of myself, taking care of my vices, taking care of, if I working myself to death because I feel like productivity makes me a valuable human being, I've had to really step back, especially recently, and say, you're still a person, even if you're not proving to someone that you're doing a good job, or your boss isn't telling you you're doing a good job all the time. If you know that you are, and if you know that you're trying, and you know that it's coming from a genuine place, you're okay. And so I think telling myself that I'm okay recently has been such a really important thing, because I'm really good at advocating for other people, which is why I think I ended up in, this point in time and where I am in my career and my life. But it's been really hard to forgive myself for I don't know what, for everything, but also to love myself. And so I think the first step comes with taking care of all of this.
I love that.
Yeah.
One second.
Take your time.
That's the word, and this has come up a bit, like productivity. I really hate that word. because we are meant to produce, and I think producing love is a really good way of saying I can be productive.
Right.
How can I be productive in creating more love in this
Right.
world? But productivity from a capitalist perspective, right, is what I
Mm,
really hate. And that's why I would say that word specifically in that context. But understanding that, I would get hard on myself. Like, I'm also very harsh. Like, why can't I perform? I hate, like, when I heard I can't do this, I can't even think
exactly.
clearly. When you actually look at your phases, like when you're in your luteal phase, when you're in follicular phase, it makes sense.
Right.
Like, what's happening, you're like, oh, so during certain periods of, during my period, I'm really productive, and that's when I have a lot of creativity and stuff.
Mhm.
And so my last business coach, she told me, she's like, cram it all into that time. You got like a
Definitely.
week. She's like, cram it in. That's what she does. She's like, I film everything. I do all my content. I set it up for when the following week. She's like, when I'm not feeling well. So I'm
Hmm.
just pushing out. She's like, and then it's really low. And she's like working with yourself. So she's like, oh, female body person, she's like working with yourself so that you are setting yourself up,
Definitely.
and honoring your body and not making it a problem, like a criticism of you. This is just what it is
Exactly.
biologically. So, like, how do we work with it?
And that was a big thing too. Just I was punishing myself so hard for not being able to function 7 days a week, 24/7, 24 hours
Mm-hmm.
a day. And once I realized, and it took me finally going to a female gynecologist who understood, who I would go in crying, like, I feel terrible. And then
Mm-hmm.
she suggested tracking, and it changed everything. And it allowed me to manage, okay, I know I'm going to get it at this point in time. I know how I'm going to feel. Maybe I should do the offline. Maybe I'm not setting meetings and going out and seeing
Mm-hmm.
people, but I'm doing work that I can do in my work from home bubble. Whereas I'll spend 2 weeks, especially right after my period, where I'm like, let's go. That's when all my best work happens. And to be able to manage that has been such a blessing, because I felt crazy for 15 years until somebody finally said, track your, and I'm so glad we're having the conversations now, because I think so many people can understand that in a way that we haven't. I wish my poor mother understood that, because she didn't. And now she's like, oh, that makes so much sense. But she's 65. She went so long without that. And I'm so grateful that we're having those conversations.
Yeah, and honoring
I can
ourselves.
imagine
And
this with kids. This with kids. Okay.
everything I think about, what if I had children? And I don't know how people are just having children. And I'm like, the things I'm going through, like, especially like emotionally, financially, all these
Mhm.
things. And I'm like, I can't imagine having children
Right.
then,
Right.
like, to take care. Like, having my dog is enough. And
Right.
even then, I'm like, oh, I've been slacking. Like, I need to give her a bath. I need to get her a haircut, like all these things. And I'm like, I gotta see if it was like another living child. Like, a
Right.
dog is enough. Like, but I can't imagine you have to show up so much,
Mhm.
so when you're not in a place emotionally, like, I have my period, like, I am dead.
Right.
Like, how am I
That's
supposed to show up for this other person when I'm literally just hugged up on the bed with like a
right.
heating pad?
Exactly.
Like, what if you're a single parent?
It makes me realize how strong my mother was, and I didn't understand
Same.
at the time. And so much makes sense in the context of my childhood, knowing now, someone with only a dog and a couple cats, that, oh, she was up against so much without the knowledge that I have also. And I think I'm at a point where I just know that I'm doing a child a favor by not bringing them in when I'm not ready, because I can't emotionally regulate enough to protect a child. Like,
Mhm.
I snap sometime, not like at anyone other than myself, but I just would never put that on a child. I don't want to birth a child, but I do want to raise children. So I'm definitely
Mhm.
adopting at some point, but when I'm ready, because I just know
Yeah.
we had to kind of fight for resources and in my family, and
Gotcha.
I don't want to do that to somebody.
No, I feel you. Like, I always said that I think children are wonderful. Like, I was a nanny
Mm,
for a bit.
I love kids.
And I love kids. I really do. I love them, especially when they're little. Like, 2 is like my favorite age. I'm like that toddler age. Everything is magical. Every day there's a milestone
Right.
almost. I was like, you really, especially when I was nannying, I was like, first time really watching a small child grow. And because of how I was interacting.
Right.
And, you know, so it was like coming in, he didn't have a good grasp of language, but that's because his old nanny didn't talk to him.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I have no one else to talk to. Who else am I going to talk? I talked to him.
Right.
And his language was improving. So the parents and I would like celebrate these milestones. I remember when that baby said yes, because yes is a very hard word for them.
Right.
It's the movement. And so like really understanding language and the barrier and watching him get frustrated and having to, you know, how to show up. But I had days where I was like, it's so hard for me to show up today. And he's so loving but they also are sponges. So he's taking things and maybe upset at with him. So that was like my introduction to parenting. Like, I had to call my mom. Like the baby won't stop crying. Like, I literally had to call my mom one night. And it was like, this is like what it's like to be like a new parent.
Right. Right.
You know, like literally on the phone back and forth with my mom. Like, what do I do now? What do I do? What do I do? Like, and like
It's different, but when my dog was a puppy, she cried all the time. I remember hiding in the bathroom and I called my mom. I was like, Mom, I'm so sorry for everything we put you through. I understand it now. I can't imagine with a child who's a sponge who can respond and there's such little things where you think you're having one impact, but they're taking it in the only way that they know how. So you don't really know what effect you're having or what they hold on to until they're old enough to articulate what that is. And there's things that I've told my parents, remember when you did this thing? They don't even remember it, but I held on to that for 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's just a scary thing. And I'd like to think I'd be a wonderful mother, but I think a part of that is waiting until I'm ready.
There's so many, sadly, so many children. You should read this book. I'm gonna get it as well. But there was a post actually today. You know, the Consciously, the guy on Instagram.
Yeah.
He was talking about this other Black woman wrote this book using all, you know, this information she pulled, this research, talking about child rearing, and that beating or like whoopings or like spanking, whatever, it actually came from white people. It came from Europe. So she said beating your children. So she said beating your children is the whitest thing you could ever do.
I've heard that.
And then one Black person guy was like, I think having kids that you allow to talk back to you and like, you know, be disrespectful is the whitest shit you could ever do. But she was like, you can discipline. I'm not saying don't discipline, but she goes into the history of how it happens and how with white people, with Europeans, they didn't value their children. They didn't love them, really.
Right.
At the core of it. And I still feel like I see this today. Like I was out hiking with a friend and this white child was like running off. It was dangerous too. We were like hiking and she's not from the US. And she was watching and she's like, she doesn't love that child. She's like, she's like, in my culture, the way our parents are, she's like, they're so overprotective. Like they protect you with their life. She's like, this child could literally run off this cliff. And this parent has no care. And I was like, I do see that a lot. And I was like, and you know, we talk about that. I think especially with like white Americans, but how that has infiltrated into the Black community and how you're instilling like corporal punishment. And he's like, that is traumatizing to children, you know, and there's so many, I have friends who grew up being hit and all these things. And some of them have such a deep love and like respect for their parents, but then some also have like horrific memories that still attach. And there's still some level of resentment. And there's still the trauma of the person you love attacking you.
Right.
And I'm like, you are still creating a dynamic where then depending on also like I understand because of how I was raised, you're creating this dynamic where you're associating love with pain. Definitely. And you're associating it with some kind of discipline. And you're going and how that affects your relationship as an adult, that's gonna have a lasting effect because you're probably gonna tolerate more things that you shouldn't. Some kind of disrespect, some kind of abuse, even if it's verbal or emotional. Because you were raised in that dynamic.
For me, I think my parents used the belt, my dad specifically. But it's interesting in hindsight, I suppose, to look at my dad. My grandma would make him go, they would have to pick the switch. They would have to go outside, find their switch, bring it inside. So they were choosing the weapon that was used against them, which it makes me cry when I think about it. It's devastating. And that did carry through to my parents' generation, and it stopped at our generation. I still remember being 13 and my dad, still traumatic, like would send us to our rooms. We knew it was coming. He would make you wait. And I remember the last time it ever happened, I didn't cry. And I was like, you can do whatever. I'm not going to cry this time. And he never did it again because the response was like, you need to know that this is punishment for doing something bad. And you know that he knew that it would affect us. And I think that was the way that he knew how to take care of children in a way where it was better than the way his parents treated him. I'd like to think that that was the very last time. But I think that in hindsight, the effect that that had and that I've recently realized on me was when I get in trouble, it's a panic response immediately. Even if I'm not in trouble, if someone says something and I think it means that I'm in trouble, I shut down. Because we would shut down and get sent to our rooms and have to wait in our rooms for an hour, knowing that this like corporal punishment was coming its way. Listen, I see my parents now and I understand that they were just doing what they knew because that's what they learned from their parents and they were trying to do something different. But it really affects you in a way that you don't anticipate, where for a long time I would hide from trouble. I would make up excuses because I was so scared of what the response would be that I would panic and cry. And for no reason. I couldn't explain myself. I didn't know how, because my dad wouldn't let us explain why we didn't deserve it. It was just, and I know he was trying to take care of it. It was like we crossed the street and we weren't supposed to. And he was like, I told you, you could have been hit by, and we could have been hit by a car, to be fair, but that was the way that they knew how to instill, I don't know, some boundaries with us. And I don't have kids. I don't know what that would be like, but I know how I respond to it as an adult now. And it's something I really had to work through and I'm still working through. So, and that's also the thing. If you can't control the anger with a child, don't have child, which is kind of why I'm so hesitant in so many ways, where I need to be fully ready to emotionally regulate. Because you do get frustrated. It's a full-time job. It's even with my dog, she needs attention all the time. She obviously can't talk back and she naps for 7 hours a day. It's hard. Sometimes you can't get out of bed in the morning. You're like, I have to walk this dog. Like, you have to show up. And until I'm ready, I'm gonna hold off.
I think you touch on some really great points, like the need to regulate, strong communication skills. It was really interesting that that post, I went into the comments, and I love going into the comments to really see what the conversations happening, because it is the Black community having this discourse. And it was a little mixed, but a lot of people saying, like, if you cannot effectively communicate, you should not have children. Because your job is to teach them how to effectively communicate, not only how they're feeling, but to also communicate and then be receptive to other people and be able to take it in. So for you, one, being silenced and not being able to advocate nor taught how to advocate for yourself, especially when you're facing a lack of safety, to say, hey, I'm not okay. This is not okay. And someone not listening to you, that creates its own kind of trauma. Definitely. And then to be held basically like in a cell, this is where it comes to corporal punishment, then watching the clock and knowing, anticipating your anxiety. It makes sense that you have high anxiety. It's kind of like waiting for death. You're like, I'm going to be harmed. I know I'm going to be harmed. And I just have to wait here to be harmed. And I cannot leave. And there's no one here who's going to protect me from this harm. And so this is just it makes me want to cry. Like, this is, and I know I know that feeling because I grew up with it. And I grew up hiding.
A lot of us did. And
I grew up hiding. I grew up hiding under beds. I grew up hiding in closets. I grew up hiding. And so when
I would layer clothes to protect myself so it would hurt less.
It would hurt.
Like hoops that you have to jump through. To protect yourself as a child as well from someone you love. And I love my parents. I love them. And I understand. Sorry, I'm crying.
I'm crying too, because I'm like, you love them, but it's like you remember what it's like to be that small and to have someone so large coming at you for things that you don't fully grasp. You don't grasp why they're so upset, even if you're old enough. And you don't understand how someone who loves you could come at you with so much anger. And then tell you, like, I'm doing this for you. And like, how is this for me, because then now we fast forward to this conversation. Here we are
Right.
crying because
I
we
know.
remember. We're like,
Yeah,
that did not do it for me. I am crying on a podcast
and I think
talking about this.
for me as well, I'm I'm a twin, but I'm the older sister of my
Gotcha.
siblings. And there were moments, now it's just bringing things up, but there were moments where we would all get in trouble for something, even if it wasn't that we were going to get the belt or we were going to get the wooden spoon. It was the fear of it, where there, I wonder if my siblings would have the same recollection of these situations, but there were, remember we trampled our mom's flower garden playing one time. It was like, who did this? Somebody has to step up and take the punishment, or you're all going to get punished. And the amount of times I felt like, I'm going to cry now, I had to protect my siblings from it.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't me, but I was like, okay, it's me. I'll take the punishment. It's like a
Sad.
defensive mechanism almost to
Mm-hmm.
you have to bear that. And in hindsight, again, like I love my parents. I understand now
Mm-hmm.
based on their parents, and
Yeah.
everyone's trying to be better than the generation before them. And we have so much access to the internet and to other people, and we can see and we can have these conversations in a way
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know that they had.
Yeah.
So I forgive that and I understand it,
Yeah.
and I would never repeat it for anyone else. And when I see it with other people, I'm like, don't touch that kid. Like, even if it's your kid,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, this is not the way. But it's the reality as an adult. A lot of the anxiety comes from thinking I'm in trouble all of the time and worrying that there's going to be a response, even if it's not a physical response, there's going to be a response to my behavior. And I'm so carefully curating everything that I'm doing to avoid that feeling that it stops you from feeling free in what you're doing. There's a defense there's a
Mm-hmm.
trauma response ready and waiting to go. So it affects the way you behave and interact with the world, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah, because you're operating from fear. And it
Definitely.
took me a long time. It took me 2020 to really understand how fearful I was.
Yeah.
And that happened because I left the country, because I was so overcome with fear. Imagine, everyone knows what happened in 2020 between George Floyd and then the pandemic. And truly, as a Black person, I would say I was terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was dealing with a lot of microaggressions in my neighborhood. I want to say maybe not a lot, but quite a few. And to the point where I was feeling like agoraphobic as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
had friends who literally had to come over and like take me for walks. Like, I was like a little dog. And I was just like, I will not leave
Right.
if someone's not with me, because I'm afraid that someone in that reality, I think, as a Black person, that question of like, do we matter?
Mm,
And being told by this country, this world, that you don't, and
right.
feeling disposable is very fear. And I think growing up like you in a household where you might feel disposable, and that creates its own foundation, right, for the society. So I think that I'm going to read that book, because I think that completely connects to then how we're raised, how we're reared, and
Mm-hmm.
then how we meet society. And thinking what you're saying, like, I'm curious, what are some of the thoughts that like come up? What are some of the beliefs that come up that you think kind of like keep you attached to fear?
That's a great question. I mean, I think some of the thoughts that keep me attached to fear are just that I'm not enough, that I'm in trouble all the time from a lack of productivity, even though I have come to realize I'm not the, I don't know how to phrase this. I'm not a result of my productivity. I'm productive in the ways that I want to be and the ways that I enjoy being, but it's just this fear of I'm in trouble all of the time. And I think it's so interesting what you say about the George Floyd of it all as well. I think it's such like a, I don't know if dichotomy is the right word, but just I think about my dad all the time and I remember his response to that, and it ties so well into kind of my career and who I am. We were raised in Australia, but my dad was always so pro, you are a Black woman, do not forget it, do not let people treat you differently. It's unfortunate that I think for, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I do feel like a lot of people feel this way, race is not something that I want to think about all the time. We are just Black
Mhm.
people. People make you think about it because they make you feel unsafe, because they make you
Mhm.
feel less than. And my dad, for all of his corporal punishment, was always very, like, you need to be proud of yourself and who you are. And what I experienced with the George Floyd of it all was the first time I found a real, and maybe this is a bigger part of my journey with my race as well. I found a really big community of people. I remember crying in the protest. I was like, holy shit, people are here and people are loud and people are vocal in a way that I felt like, as far as the fear element goes, I feel like I hide a lot. And I feel like I've been hiding for a very long time. And feel like that was a real turning point for me to say, I'm actually not gonna hide and I'm not gonna be quiet and I'm not gonna try and fit myself into this box of this is the person that I need to be accepted. Because we can get into Australia. That was a rough upbringing, but
Yeah, because you
I
are
feel
bringing
like
something really different because you are, and both your parents are Australian.
no, my dad is a Black American man.
I kind of felt like that. I didn't know, but I was like, he's giving vibe of like
It's
American because you
my
said
dad is,
switch, and I was like, we're not
oh yeah,
getting switches in Australia.
my
Like,
dad,
but anything goes in Australia, so I don't know.
true. It's
That's
such a
southern.
so
That's
opposite.
southern black.
My dad is from Shorterville, Alabama. He is from Deep
Ooh,
South.
yeah.
The most of my family on my dad's side lives in New Jersey and Florida. And I visited, I'm so grateful that he did this for me when I was 17. I grew up a little bit in America. I did years 1 through 3 in America, and then I moved back to Australia. But I came back when I was 17, and he was very determined to show me how he grew up and the people that he grew up with and the reality of life for him. And he was in the military, and my grandpa was in the military, and my great grandpa was in the military. And I can only speak for my dad, but I think he thought that it would somehow change his position as a Black man in America. And you know what the reality of the military is. But he took me on this tour of the places that he was from, and I really got to see it. And it totally, I don't know. And so I'm gonna cry. But in
You
some
can
way,
cry. I'm gonna cry. I was like, this is the first one I've cried on, so
I'm sorry, I'm a crier. If you ask any of the guys that I work with, they're like, Shanice is just a crier. But I cry when I feel moved. I cry because I feel like crying and
yeah.
because, I think it comes from an honest place.
You
But
need to release. Your body's like, I need to
exactly,
release this. So
exactly. I forgot the question, but
it was, or you answered it though. It was like, what are the beliefs? And you went to it. I'm not enough, and that was one that
yeah,
I thought because I also took a long time to reconcile that I am enough, and that came
right,
through a lot of trauma therapy and
definitely.
many years of therapy. But we were talking about fear and the intersections
And
of
it's
that.
really, I think it's, to be very honest, for I know I have a different upbringing, even though I did grow up in parts in America. My dad is very pro-Black American man. Grateful that he instilled that in us. I spent a lot of time. I mean, I grew up mostly in Australia, and that came with an exceptional amount of hiding and an exceptional amount of fear, an exceptional amount of feeling like you had to fit in. And I think that all of these different things, resulted in a lot of anxiety, a lot of hiding. And so I'm really grateful to my dad for showing me that he grew up so that I could contextualize the way that he is now. And it came with a lot of
Mhm.
forgiveness and it came with a lot of understanding that your parents are doing this for the first time too. It's not a test run and then you have kids. It's like you're all in. And they did it quite young too. So I mean, I'm 30 and I cannot imagine having to deal with and multiple little people. But yeah, I think it sticks with me in the fear response and in hiding. And I've been learning lately to hide less and to be proud and to not be, and we can get into this, we've talked about it. I hide from the Black community too because I feel like I'm not fully
Yeah.
there, and it's just such a, I'm trying to do that less. I think it comes with acceptance, and accepting yourself and forgiving yourself is the hardest thing. I can do it for anyone else, but for myself, it's so difficult, and I'm getting there slowly.
Well, let's dive into it a little bit because I'm curious why in Australia. I mean, I know Australia is very racist. But
Mhm.
why your experience? Why did you feel like the need to hide? What did assimilation look like for you? And yeah,
Yeah, why?
why wasn't being black like enough for you?
It's a different kind of racism in Australia. There's a lack of community in the way that when I first moved to America, I moved to Chicago and I was
Mm.
surrounded by people who looked like me for the first time in my life. Except when we lived in Virginia, it was a very diverse crowd. But when we moved back to Australia, my dad was like, do not let people treat you like less than because you were a black person. They don't care. There's no one. It was me and my siblings. We were the black kids in school. They found out that, well, they would say the N word, which I physically cannot say. I actually, it's so funny because I worked on the TV series Atlanta.
Mm.
I was close with Donald and his brother Steven, and they were like, Shanice, you're black, just say it. And I cannot
Yeah.
say the N word because it makes me cry because of, I'm going to cry out the ways that it was used against us because they knew it hurt us. And in America, there's a community to say, I'm going to back you. I'm going to, no,
Yeah.
don't do that. You don't, not in Australia. Maybe it's changed now, but I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s. It's very much, and I think a lot of people, I've been seeing a lot of people talk about it lately, just the experience of growing up in a non-diverse, specifically white
Mm.
community, and it really affects the way that you see yourself. I felt like a swamp monster most of my life. I thought I was hideous because I was bigger, because I had big thighs, because I had big lips. Now everyone has that, not naturally, but
Oh.
they really hold that against you. And so I think it came with a lot of assimilation, a lot of, I relaxed my hair for the first time. I begged my mom, and my mom was like, and she was like, don't do it, don't relax your hair, you don't need to fit in. And she always cared for us, but my dad wasn't always around, so we didn't have the, I do think it would have been a very different situation if my mother was black and my dad was white, but I didn't have that. So I grew up with
Mm.
no one to look up to, um, until I moved to America. And then I felt community for the first time, but I also realized how much I didn't fit into that community. I didn't understand the references. I felt out of place in the culture. It was it's an embarrassment feeling, to be honest. Sorry, I'm crying.
Interesting. No, please don't apologize. Please don't, because it's important.
Yeah,
Like, why embarrassed? I mean, we're Americans, so it's not your culture, but it doesn't mean you don't belong. You're not Drake. You're not cosplaying
people
blackness.
kind of like. I mean, Jake.
You're the
Yeah,
second person. You're the third person I've had from this mixed race where Drake is. This conversation has come up. So I want
really.
you to know, and I'm gonna do maybe a party at the end where all of you guys get to meet each other because I think you should, because there's so many overlaps.
Right.
And one of Marissa, she has an episode and she's raised by a white woman, and
Yeah.
her father's black, and she talks about that, but being
Right.
presenting as a black woman. And then my other friend, who's raised by a very famous activist, her mother
Mhm.
is a black woman, so she goes, and she's even more fair skinned than you are.
Right.
And she's like, but I am a black woman. Like, I was born, I came from a black woman, therefore I am.
Right.
And so, even talking to Marissa, the difference for being like, I came from a white woman, but I am not a
Right.
white woman. And what is that dynamic? She's like, and she grew up in a very white space. And,
Right.
also, so I feel like, please don't apologize. I want you to dig in because
No, I
this,
feel
why embarrassing?
it's just so interesting. It's just been, I feel like the embarrassment comes from a lot of realization that happened later in life. I still remember, and look, my parents wanted us to grow up outside of America to be
Mm-hmm.
safe. We went through a lot. I lived in America from, I think, 1999 to 2001. And we left right after 9/11. And there was so much happening in Virginia where we were living. There was the DC sniper, there was 9/11, there was,
Mm.
weird people. Our teachers were standing in single file as we got off the school bus, and we were walking single file into the school, which now, in hindsight, I've been listening to people talk about it, is traumatic. They were human shields, and my parents said, no, we're going back to Australia, which was fine. But it also came with a lot of, I love my mother so much, and she did her absolute best. But I remember having the conversation. My sister's very much an activist, very much
Mm-hmm.
pro Black. She grew up more with my dad.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so, yeah, we only split for a little bit, but she went with my dad and I went with my mom. And so my mom would get upset when my sister would say, she would call her out on things that she would say. And I don't think it came from a malicious place. It came from her. She's a white woman who grew up in Australia with a bunch of white people. They're kind
Mm-hmm.
of a little, like 2 years, I'd say, behind the culture. So things come to them late. They're surrounded by people who look like them. And so
Oh
it's a lot
no.
of learning, but it's really unfortunate when you as a Black person become the learning or the teacher. Everyone's
Mm-hmm.
asking the same questions. Everyone's saying, well, why do you feel this way? But I have to talk about it every single day. Every day, someone reminds me that I'm a Black person, especially when they find out that I'm Black and Australian. And I have to explain that my father is American because no one accepts me as Australian. No one accepts me as American. No one accepts me as white. A lot of people accept me as Black, but a lot of people also don't. And so I think that's the like feeling out of
Oh.
control of who you are is like a big thing. But I remember my mom saying, and she was crying when she said this, she was like, I just hate that you guys have to walk through the world and experience this. And I was like, but you chose to have children with the Black
Mm-hmm.
man, and I don't get to wake up and ignore the fact that I'm Black because other people see me as a Black person. And I think it's a lot of having to learn how to deal with that later in life because I spent so long trying to assimilate and trying to hide and dyeing my hair blonde, even though it's blonde now. But trying I'm pretty fair skin, and we were bleaching our skin at 12, hiding it from our parents because we wanted to be like everyone else, and boys wouldn't date us, and I felt ugly, and I didn't learn until I was in my 20s that it was okay to be who I am and that I'm not ugly because I don't fit the beauty standard. There's also no representation in TV or film in Australia for Black people unless you were the best friend. And I remember talking to my mom when I was 16. She actually came into my room because I was crying. And she was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I just think I realized that I'm not supposed to be the main character. I'm supposed to be the best friend, and I'm supposed to be the comedic relief because that's what I was seeing in movies and TV. So I felt I
Makes me
felt
want to
like
cry.
not a person for a really long time. And it took me being around other Black people um, to realize that. And I wish I had that a lot sooner in my life. But I don't blame my parents for it. But
No, but
it would have changed how I feel about myself now.
yeah.
Anyway, thanks for making me cry.
Well, thank you
Sorry.
for being vulnerable. No, because like the things that I do know about you, the struggles that I do, and we've talked about. I don't want to say anything. Obviously, I can edit this out, but
You can say
I don't want
anything.
to. You and I both have struggled with like body image issues, weight
Hmm.
things, and occupying white spaces definitely had a lot to do with that. And this not being, and like you had to discover what my Blackness was, not because I didn't grow up in a Black home. I did, but the only way I can relate is to say that I grew up straddling white spaces at school and then Black at home, but then being told, and this, I feel like this is where for the Black Americans we understand that,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to speak for all Black Americans, but for the Black Americans who grew up straddling two different worlds,
Hmm.
um, coming back to your world, so to speak, and then being rejected and
Right.
being told that you sound white,
Hmm.
um colorism coming into play. Like I mean, I always tell people I'm always tan because I live in LA and I absorb sun, but put
Right.
me in a winter in New York, you will see how white I can get. And my friend was very like brown, deep brown skin, like dark skin, and so I was labeled the light skin friend,
I
and so that always came up in a conversation, right?
I
And
used
being a
to
kid and not
hide.
understanding that.
Exactly. Truly used to hide from the sun to be in Australia, to be
Mm.
as white as I could because I thought that that meant assimilating. I thought people would finally accept me. The way that me and my sister have both ended up in America, but the way that we ourselves, but also were hidden by other people is very traumatic in that I never dated. The one person I dated in Australia let go of my hand when we were around other people, and it was like a big secret to keep, and it makes you feel really
Ugh.
bad about yourself as a kid.
Yeah, that's
Had it
terrible.
a lot worse than I did. It felt like there was a vendetta against her for some reason.
Is
Um,
it because she's so vocal?
it's because she wouldn't back down, whereas I was like, I'll do whatever I can to assimilate, and I did. And I'm ashamed of it, but I did it.
No, there's
Uh,
nothing to be ashamed of. That's just how you learned how to keep yourself
it's
safe.
how you want to survive, you
Yeah,
know?
you learned how to. Everyone's different. How
Yeah,
fight or flight. Your sister's the
exactly.
fighter. She's
She's a
like, I'm gonna
violent.
go. She's like, I'm gonna go down throwing
She
punches.
was for
She's
this.
like, if I'm going down, you're going down. That's your
And
sister.
she always was. She was like not afraid to be in like 19 protesting out on when it wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
people
The
posting
thing.
black squares on their Instagram. It wasn't white
Yeah.
people showing up. It was black people saying enough is enough. And she'd be out there, and my mom was always so scared for her. And she was like, this is all I can do. I don't know. I'm not going to
Yeah.
be quiet. And I was so willing to be quiet because I wanted people to accept me. And I think that was the big shift of I'm so glad that I'm in America for all of America's faults. I'm so glad that there's a community around me, embrace me, and Jesse Williams actually said this really, really well, and it totally ties into kind of what I do with my walk and what I do just in life in general is that if I am championing my community, because my dad again was always very much you are a black person. Yes, I have an accent, but I'm a dual citizen. I grew up in
It's a
America.
nice accent.
Thank
You
you.
have a nice Australian accent. Yeah, I told you. I've known you for years. You do not sound this Australian
Well, if I
normally.
go to Australia, if you hear my parents, you're like, this is
I know
not.
you've done a version of your mom for me once at a party, and you're like,
It's very,
and I was like,
very
"What's wrong with
Australian.
your accent?" Because I was like, "You don't sound Australian." You say you're Australian. I said you sound slightly British,
Yeah,
not Australian. And
that's what.
I was like, "You sound very American," and you're like, "No, I worked really hard to suppress it because it could sound very Australian."
Well, it's so interesting because if you look at their like childhood videos, we started in Australia, super Australian, like the voices, so Australian. But I did years 1 through 3 in America, so I learned to
Mm-hmm.
read and write and speak to people. So it went full American, and then I went back to Australia for 10 years, and it kind of ended up in this mixed bag. And I've been back in America for 10 years, so it's like there's no. I don't even hear it. My sister will be like, "You sound like this phase." I can't control it. It's just it is what it is. So I've just given up and I feel like a lot of it is I was in Australia. It was easier to survive if you sounded American as well. Once people found out my dad was
Hmm.
American, because Black
Why?
American people for everything that like it's hard to be Black anywhere, but people love the culture.
They do.
People, the culture is culture,
Mm-hmm.
and they love it. So they loved my dad. They loved my brothers who were tall and played basketball, and they were the Black kids on the team, but it's very different. It's a very different experience when you're a woman. And I think that's why, of all my siblings, my sister and I have ended up in America because we desperately needed community because of the way people treat Black women.
Do you
So
think the men? I didn't even know you had brothers. I thought it was just you and
it's
your
three.
sister. Three.
I have a
Five.
younger brother and two older brothers.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was just you and Tara.
Oh,
But
no. We're just always
oh,
together.
well, the twins, you're twins. It makes sense that you would be. I mean, weird that the fact that you guys even separated for a period. I was like, that's weird for twins. Twins don't
Yeah,
separate like that.
reverse parent trap is what we call it.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I'm like wondering, do you think it was for some reason the men were treated better because they were maybe fetishized
Absolutely. I
versus
talk about that all the
you
time.
guys weren't fetishized?
Exactly. And I can see I mean I can't speak for my older brothers. I was just around my our younger brother is 2 years younger and we were always in school together and I have fought many girls on his behalf. Just like the way that they would treat them is like disgusting to me, honestly.
Yeah.
Like I think that people there's definitely a fetishization, especially of Black American men, but I think Black men in general, in a way some women of ulterior or alternate complexion of um
The
parents
melanin deprived.
of mine and well it's so funny all my siblings are the same shade but my mom loves a specific type of man and my dad loves a specific type of woman even though my older brothers are my half brothers but we didn't get that as women which I'm glad we you know what we did get it in certain ways of I'm sure all Black women can unfortunately relate to this. They're like, oh, you're not like others. You're my first. I've always
Hmm.
wondered what this would be like, but it's a secret thing, especially when you're young. It was always a secret thing, and I had my heart broken many times because of it, but also because I wasn't willing to put up with it. I definitely did when I moved back to America and kind of come into my worth go on, journey that I think a lot of people who grew up in white communities go on, which was that I'm actually not hideous. I actually my value comes from myself, not other people
Mhm.
placing value on me and accepting less because it felt like I was getting something that I didn't get when I was young. Actually, then you have to get to, and it's the canon event. Then you have to get to the next step of, oh, okay, I'm not this person that I hated,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I deserve more and I am worth more and I still demand respect, not just acceptance. I
Mhm.
think that's been a very big journey. And I think I'm at this point more guarded with my heart and my time because it's less about like earning something that I couldn't get when I was young and more about, I don't know, somebody seeing me for me and being
Mhm.
able to have these conversations. And unfortunately I have a history with white men. And
You love those white boys. Every
I just
talking.
said it's no, it is. It's I call it a colonialism trauma response of
Honestly,
growing up
maybe because you're
around, of
just so conditioned.
definitely. And
And
it's an
like,
acceptance thing. It has
I was
been
gonna say,
an
are you still trying? Maybe that's what I was gonna ask you. Like, do you think you're still trying to get some kind of acceptance, some kind of validation through dating white men?
no, I definitely have branched away from dating white men recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's actually been really refreshing be able to not have to fight for my values. That was the thing I was doing, especially when I first moved to America and I was dating and my values didn't always align with the person that I was dating, or I was fighting their parents because their parents were racist. And I think especially as a Black woman, you end up I don't people come to you to ask questions, but I'm asked the same questions every single day of like, well, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of this? And I'm like, you have the internet. You can go teach yourself what is
Mm-hmm.
happening in the world. I don't want to spend every day talking about race or talking about politics or talking about, I love talking about it, but when someone's like coming to you as if they're the only person who's ever come to you. And I've gotten in many
Mm-hmm.
fights, and someone's like asking me, I'm like, you're isolating me from the rest of the group because you're singling me out to ask these because you obviously don't spend a lot of time around Black people. It's just, it can get really frustrating. And so I forgot the question
Yeah.
at this point, but I
It also
definitely
raises
away from it.
you. It also raises you as a person. That's the way my experience has always been, especially professionally. And
Definitely.
um, it was always like I don't get to exist as Eve, nor do you
Hmm.
get to just exist as Shanice. It's like
Yeah.
Black first, and I'm
Black
like,
first.
yeah, and I'm like, I do identify as a Black woman, even if I
Right.
don't even use gender, but I'm thinking of myself as Eve first,
Right.
not as Black person
Well, I
first.
always say that
So it's so weird.
I don't wake up in the morning and the first thought I have is just remember you're Black today.
We gotta
I
check that box, like Black
only think
person.
about it when somebody makes me think about it. And it's
Yeah.
unfortunately a lot and it works in both ways. I've been told that and I'm the only Black woman at my company. I've been told that I got the job because I'm Black, but then I got the job because, YZ, but it's like, and then I'm at the company and I love being able to be a voice for people of color and for minorities and for women and for queer people. And it kind of works in, I'm so glad to be in that place to be a voice, but also when
Mhm.
people use it against you, like, well, you're only in that place to be, I'm actually a person and I have
Mhm.
feelings and it's really difficult. And even with the dating element of it, there's been a real realization for me recently that some people just see you as Black and it's this like exotic thing and they're trying it. And then when they realize that you're a full, real person, there's
Yeah.
it's either they double down, great, like you like me for who I am, that's very, very rare, or it's, you're this thing that I feel like they get overwhelmed by. And I can tell when I'm talking about race and I'm talking about my experience, I'm talking about how which is just a part of who I am. And it's a conversation anyone would have with somebody that they're dating.
Mhm.
When it gets to the race point, it's overwhelming for people. They don't want to deal with the reality of the racial element. And
Mhm.
I think that in I don't know. I think it's less about like now dating people of color. I think it's more about somebody actually seeing me. But I find that I have to explain myself less when someone has had a similar experience, even if it's, just anyone who's a fish out of water, I feel, who's been up against, so much. I think there's I don't know what the word is. There's like a clash, I think, when you are
Yeah.
experiencing the world, especially as a brown person, there's so much more that you're aware of. I know somebody, I can't remember who said it, maybe Jordan Peele, but he said it's like the Twilight Zone. You're like,
Yeah.
we're all looking at each other like, is this happening? And it's you grow up for so long aware of it that you have no choice but to deal with it. And so, I mean, as far as even just kind of working hard, I've always had to work hard. That was Olivia Pope said that. Like,
Yeah.
work twice as hard to get half as much. But
Yeah,
that's
that's
the
how I
way.
was raised
I don't
on.
know how to operate any other way. I kind of hate that all the black women in film are my complexion because if I see myself represented, maybe a darker skinned person doesn't see themselves represented. But if a darker skinned person is represented, I win too. Like there's no
Hmm.
way for me to lose, and I'm very hyper aware of my privilege, and I'm grateful for my dad for instilling like don't let anyone tell you who you are except for yourself, because as long as I'm pushing my community forward, like I can accept myself in that community and I know the community would accept me too. So that's really the biggest thing for me. That's it's just the most important thing for me is being a champion.
I love that. I want to touch on one more thing before we go, or one and a half
I got
things.
time if you got time.
We touched on fairness, we touched on dating, and
Mm-hmm.
entering the Black community, which, I'm like, come to us,
Right.
come. But I understand because I did have my own journey into Blackness because I grew up in a family where having a close proximity to whiteness was the goal. I had a long fear of dating Black women, like
Disgusting.
such a fear. Literally into 2020, I remember having like a Zoom with one of my friends, Alex Phillips, who's also an actor, and one of my friends, Davina. And we're also in the industry, so we also really understood too as also like lighter on the lighter side of being black,
Right.
right? What that how that affected our careers and how they were
Mm-hmm.
treated, right? Because every time we were in our jobs, we were always lighter skinned, so lighter skinned black people
Right.
as executives. It's really true. Most of them are. And so we were talking about, I was just saying how, yeah, I didn't like both of them were date black women. One, Alex is married to a black woman, and I had never been in a relationship at the time with a black woman.
Right.
And I was like, I am so scared because I don't feel black enough.
Right.
And my friend Alex grew up also in a very white space and white schools. And she was like, girl, I went through that too, but look, I'm with a black woman. And she's like, you got to jump ship. Jump ship. She's like, you are black enough. You are you. And she's like, that's what we need to get down to as black people. They're not a monolith. This
Right.
is coming from them.
Right.
This programming that you are not enough of who you are, just innately. She's
Right.
like, you are enough just because you're you. You don't have to cosplay blackness. You don't have to
Mm.
perform blackness. It's not one thing to perform. It's actually impossible, I think, to perform blackness.
Right.
Because I think if you're performing blackness, that means you have created a construct in your mind of what blackness is. And you've reduced it to what you think is the culture. When
Right.
people think culture and they think it's hip hop, it's rap, it's whatever it is, right? It's wearing
Right.
whatever clothes. And I'm like, being into anime and that is part of the culture. So, rock music, part of the culture. We invent
Right.
that. House music, our culture. I may have taken it over, but that's all us. So I'm always in the culture. Well, no matter what I'm doing. Shit,
Right.
like me, Megan the Stallion can watch anime. You're still in the culture,
Mm-hmm.
And going into queerness, going into blackness, especially in LA. So I'm going to lay the framework of how do you feel as a queer person? Because I look at you as, you are a queer person who dates men, but mainly.
Classic, classic bisexual.
But then as a queer person in blackness, like how do you feel that like has affected you, especially
Mm.
in exploring your own queerness? And then like what do you want going forward? As you're becoming your highest self, like what does that even look like for you?
It's so interesting. We're getting into like, I need to see a therapist about this, but you're gonna fill that position today because I think
Come
if
see
I
me.
if
I'll
I
put
look
you
at
through it.
everything in the 50,000 foot view of everything, I think growing up in Australia in a white community, being treated a very specific way because we were black and black women were viewed as very masculine, and
Yeah.
I rejected that and I felt like I had to do so many things. I always, again, like I still struggle to find myself attractive a lot of the time, even though I'm happy with how I look. It's just the way that I was treated as a kid. I think that the feeling of needing to be small and feminine and assimilate into whiteness has really affected it as an adult. And I think there's two parts. There's the black side, there's the black element, and then there's the queer element on top of that. My
Mhm.
issue, I'm not saying it's all black men, but that I've had with a lot of black men who I've spoken to or I've been dating, is that they tend to remind me that I'm not black enough. And I don't like having to defend myself. And I don't like, and I understand that it's a different conversation and it's a different experience. And it's one, my father has very much been like, this is what the experience is. We lived it for 3 years, which is not a long time. I know that I come from a very different background, but I think there's always been a fear, even if in the community, but also in dating, of again not being enough. And then I think in that I've always felt like I've had to date or I've had to seek out or I've been attracted to because I felt like I needed to be the small girl
Mhm.
because I'm rejecting this box that people I felt put me into as a young person. And so I think that there's a lot of fear that comes with it. I think that my sister is much more open about it. I'm very scared. I also deeply respect women and they scare the shit out of me in a way where I feel like I can't hide from them. And I think that
Mm.
that's so important in a relationship, but I think it's very scary. And I think that it means that I have work to do to be able to feel comfortable in that space. And to be honest, I think that I'm still scared of having to do that work and of having to continue to learn more and unravel more about myself. And so I think that's where, like, I don't want to say it's a blockage, but I think that that's where a lot of and it's not a hesitancy either. It's just that I think that this one path, which tends to be men, is a lot easier to deal with because I can hide from them.
Yeah.
Which is not healthy in relationships. I know it's not healthy in relationships, but it's a survival tactic in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I really think it's a fear element, but I also think that in coming into, I think the first step was treating myself better and to
Well,
taking care of myself. And I think that that is the beginning of the process of unraveling a lot of the mechanisms that I've realized I've been using to hide, to put the blockages up, to say, okay, well, like if a woman talks to me, I panic in a way where if a man talks to me, I'm like the best version of myself because I'm like,
interesting.
oh, I can perform for you in a way that she sees me.
Yes.
And I've been in that situation before where I'm like, she sees me too much and I'm going to run away. And so it's a process
Oh,
for me, but I think it's so interesting when I do look at it that all of these things combine the way I was treated as a kid, the way that I see myself as a woman, the way that I see myself as a Black woman, the way that I then interact with men, and the way that I then hide from people who make me the most honest version of myself. And so it's definitely a journey and a process for me that I'm still walking through. Sometimes I'm scared to walk through. I think I've just really hit a point and it's one of the best things that's ever happened in my life where I'm just like, oh, it's who the person is first rather than like what you need this thing to prove for you. Because I feel like, you know, I'm trying to supplement the need that I had as a kid with
yeah.
who I'm dating. And now I'm like, I've just hit a point where I can't do that anymore. I need somebody who sees me as a full person, but that's really scary to have to learn and to have to figure out. And it's a scary situation to put yourself in. So it's a work in progress for
I mean, it's
me.
great
For
awareness. I'm like,
thank
it's
you.
incredible awareness. I regretted the times where I did go back and date a white person.
Mm,
And wasn't because really like race. I don't think they were thinking from a racial perspective. I would say the last white person was, and I have a black partner, it was more so you're actually just fundamentally selfish
mm,
as a person, and you're actually not understanding the racial dynamic here and
right.
how that does create another layer for me in
Definitely.
my experience of you and your behavior. And just because you're aware politically does not mean that it carries over into your day to day, your social life, and how
Definitely.
you're actually treating Black people. I was like, because how you're treating me is as if I don't matter.
Right.
And yet here you are saying Black lives matter. And I've had
Exactly.
that happen with quite a few white people where I was like, you will hold a flag and you will protest and you will say this, but do you actually make Black people feel that they matter in your
Right.
life? Because I feel like a lot of you probably don't. And that is my experience. And so my brain is going, girl, date Black woman. If you want someone who's going to see you, date a Black woman. Because maybe and not because you should do that, but I think a lot of your healing might come from that. I think being with someone who, like you, is still on their own journey to Black. We all are. You know, I
Right.
feel like that is understanding, just like I have a good grasp of what I feel like as a Black person. It's still evolving, right?
Right.
We're people.
Mhm.
So I think all to say, if you dating someone, I could just say from the person I dated, it didn't end well. We're still in the scene together. I still see her, you know, wish her the best and whatever. We tried to be friends multiple times after. It's one of those where you're like, if we're not together, tension between us is too much. Like we're just
Right.
gonna butt. Like Aries and Sag, we're gonna butt heads because I'm not backing down and you're not backing down.
Right.
And so
A
if
Sagittarius, I
I
will say.
love a, I love a Sag. I love a Libra.
I love a Sag.
I love a Libra. That's Libra girl energy. And I'm like, give me a Libra,
I
please.
am a notorious lover. It's a
You are
personality.
the lover. You are the lover. And I think it's funny because I'm like, oh yeah, but my brain, when you were saying that, you're like, I'm not right. Like, you're a lover. That's your function. You know, and Sages were like the mix of both. And it took me a long time to realize that I'm also living out a dynamic because I'm going to people harsh and critical and
Yes.
tough and much more of a masculine energy. And that's what I was raised with. And then like going now into dating, I'm like, oh, I actually need a lot of gentility. And
That's
I need
good.
someone who's very loving and very soft because I'm learning that. And so I need someone who that's innate to
Right.
them, who is going just by being them, can learn how to apply that to myself. And it's
Right.
really powerful when it's a Black woman who treats themselves so gently and so lovingly that I'm like, oh, this is what
Right.
it can feel like. You know, so I'm saying, as someone who's had some healing through dating Black women, I would say it's really powerful. And also just a strong support system of friends.
Right.
I feel like now my circle has really gone from being very white to now I'm just surrounded by Black women.
Right.
And I fucking love it.
I think it's so funny because I really hold on to a lot of the things that I think my mother, who I love, she's my best friend, but she has always seen me in a way that I maybe not been able to see myself. And I still remember when I was younger, because I think that in the context of all of this, I historically have been seeking out a masculine energy. But what I've
Mm-hmm.
come to realize is that I am the masculine energy, and I am my daddy's daughter, and I do not take people telling me what to do well, and I don't take I need to be in charge, and I need someone who just is gentle and loving and caring and kind and thoughtful. But I've been dating men who want to be in control, and I don't do well when anyone is trying to control me. And
Yeah.
she's always said, that's the kind, like exactly what you just described, that's the kind of person you're going to end up with, and I know it. And I think
Yeah.
that it really is, it's like realizing that I am more of the masculine energy because I had to be that
Yeah,
way.
you
And
look a
because that's who I am
protector.
naturally, I think, and I don't know, I think that I'm gonna get to a point where I'm ready for all of this, because I do agree with everything you are saying, where it's like you just need to experience that. It's a completely different experience, and it's
It's
just a
totally
realization that I've had very recently. Like, especially after my last relationship, and he was wonderful, but very much my father, and
different.
it was just clashing so hard because I'm like, don't tell me what to do. But yeah, definitely, I think it's a process, and I think it comes with a lot of like understanding who you are as a person too, and then again
Mm-hmm.
realizing why I was seeking out those kinds of people. And I
Yeah.
think there was a lot of like, it's funny, I'm putting all of the dots together in this conversation. It's a lot of wanting to feel safe and wanting to feel taken care of, but then realizing like I'm actually the caretaker of myself. And I honestly am at a point where, and I'm glad I've gotten to this point, and I think a lot of women especially are getting to this point where I would rather be single than deal
Mm-hmm.
with someone who is clashing with my personality or who doesn't fit, or I'm
Mm-hmm.
not trying to force myself into relationships anymore. And that comes from the friend group as well, because I mean, I hold, again, I love love. I will ask you within a minute of meeting you, are you happy? Who are you in love with? Tell me everything, because I want to also know you better. But I hold love to the same romantic love, friendship love, family love, love I have for my job, the love I have for my career. I hold it all at the same level, and I feel fulfilled in all elements. I always say I'm my friend's like best boyfriend that they'll ever have, because I
Oh.
will show up at the airport with flowers for you because you need it. Because I'm like, your boyfriend should be doing that for you. I'm gonna do it
Mm-hmm.
for you instead. So all of our bars slowly raise because I'm like, bringing me water in the middle of a meeting because she can tell that I'm looking at the fridge. Like, if a man's not doing that for me, if a partner's not doing that for me, I don't want it. Like, and I'm not saying
Yeah.
it's service, and it's not an acts of service thing. It's like
It's a
being,
care.
it's a care, it's a being
It's a
seen.
yeah, it's a care. It's a
And I think
nourish
that's
and
so
wanting
important.
to nourish the person you're
Definitely.
with and see them nourish. And I definitely hear that, and like you just become more selective because we're at the end of the day we're attracting mirrors, right? So you go back, I'm
Definitely.
in my masculine. All the people I've dated, I can see the growth through them. So it gets me very excited every time
Mhm.
I date someone and I'm like, oh, like the last person I was talking to, she's going through a lot. And so for me was what I actually took away from it. I could see that she was kind of me career wise a little bit further. And
Mhm.
she said that too. She's like, I remember where you are during this pivot, and like she pivoted careers and like started. She's like, it's a crunchy time, and but I felt like emotionally, it's like she was further here, but then emotionally, I was further here. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, you remind me of me and how I used to process grief and how I used to latch on to people. And I still
Right.
go through that where I will want to take a person like and
Right.
date them because I'm going through turmoil and this makes me like latching on to them makes me feel safe.
Right.
Right. But through that, I also could see so much of the growth. I was like, oh
Right.
no, she's a wonderful person outside of what she's going through. Like she's
Mm.
wonderful. What she's going through is not allowing her to show up in the way that she needs to.
Right.
And I can empathize with that, but it's really forced me to become my growth has forced me to become so much more selective and with friends to be like,
Definitely.
if I and I had this conversation, I think literally yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I was crying, talking to my sponsor and going, the white friends that I had to finally break from because I was being told I was too much, because I was being
Interesting.
told that my like a lot of my passion and excitement and how my personality is, I was being told I was aggressive
Interesting.
even when I was being protective of them. And to be
Right.
fair, with one of them, I was right. I was like, don't date this person. They're fucked up. Like everything in my antenna is going up and saying, do not date that person. And multiple people warned her. And sure, and she got mad at me, like, you're being really aggressive. I'm being really protective
Right.
of you. So I was like, I'll knock this girl out. I know
Right.
she's gonna do some fucked up shit, some real, real shit. And she did.
I feel
And it's just one of those things where I was like, but if I am showing love for my friend and I was not being overly aggressive, we're in a
right.
car talking about this. But if me showing you that I will go to the end of the world for you, like I'm going to protect, if this person is not showing up for you how you need and not respecting you, yes, I'm going to be upset. That's a
Right.
problem. This is not a dynamic I should be in. If my love
Right.
for you is a problem, that's not a dynamic
Right.
that I want because you're telling me not to love you
Right.
that much and not to be vocal.
Yeah, I think that there's I guess three things to respond to that. I think the reason that I like to show my friends love in the way that I do is to let them know that they're worthy of that, and so they're not settling, and it's everyone's, personal choice at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. I'm like, go, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
we all go through it. We all go through it. I've definitely been through it myself. But I also think that kind of dating someone at a different level than you are, I've come to really realize recently that if you're dating someone for their potential, you're actually dating someone for your potential. You're like, I can get them to this
Mm.
place. And I've been historically dating people for their potential, and then like, why can't I get you to this place? And a lot of my relationships have ended because of that, and I realized I was trying to like force myself into something that just wasn't fitting for me. And so now I'm like, I want to get myself to a place where I'm completely happy with myself so that I can meet someone who's at that level. Also, rather than force myself into a relationship, it's going to happen when it's going to happen. Like, I'm a
Uh-huh.
lover girl. I'm open to, if someone brings me love and it's reciprocated, like, I'm not going to shut it down. But it also has made me very selective of, just because it's available doesn't mean it's right for you. Just because
Uh-huh.
it's less about, does this person like me and do I like this person? And I have to like
Exactly.
that person, because otherwise the worst feeling is getting in a relationship and being the bad guy and having to be like, this is, I'm uncomfortable now. And I talk a lot about shedding, and it's like that uncomfortable feeling of like something's wrong.
Uh-huh.
You have to shed the things that don't, shed the friends that don't make sense for your life, that are disrupting the energy, shed the relationship that's
Uh-huh.
not right, and like release them too, because there's more people. There's always someone else who's
Uh-huh.
gonna love you, who's gonna love them. And I think people feel so protective because those are the way we're taught, is you find someone, you stick with them, you fight for it. I actually don't believe that. Like, you have to fight tooth and nail, because my parents fought tooth and nail to stay together for the kids. And I was like, you guys should get a divorce. Like, this is not healthy for anybody. And they're both in love with different people. And it's amazing. And I'm so glad that they found that kind of happiness for themselves. But I think it's just also, it's a conditioning thing that we've been taught, especially as women. You get taught like, I need to hold on to this person, I need to make this work. I disagree. It's a mutual thing, but if you're fighting to hold on to
Uh-huh.
this thing, it's probably just not right for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And I love what you said, because the question is, for me, is changed too. And it's more of, it's, did the divine choose us for each other?
Right.
And I'm like, I called in my divine partner. And so with the
Mm,
last person, I was clear about that. And she was like, what does that even look like? And I was like,
right.
I was ready. Now, am I ready? I don't know. That's up to the higher power.
Right.
Right. But I said that that is where I'm at, in the sense. And to be fair, I think everyone that you end up aligned with is divine.
Right.
It is a divine connection. It is propelling you to the next step if you choose to take the
Definitely.
lessons that come with that partnership, because it is a mirror of
Right.
you,
Exactly.
right? So you could choose to take and go, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do now. This is what I need to work on. This is what I need to heal,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
But I'm definitely like you, going, I'm very selective with friends and with partners, going, does the divine want us to be
Hmm.
attached in this way?
I would rather someone wake up and choose me every day and me choose them every day, rather than like put it in a contract and now we don't have to worry and now we can get lazy. Like, I think the magic of it comes from choosing someone every day and growing with that person. And I don't know if I found that person yet. And I'm sure it's out there. And I'm not looking. I definitely long for it, as I think everyone does, but I'm not like looking. I'm not out there like,
Uh-huh.
okay, where is it? I'm just like, again, like, I
You're
hold
not on the
all.
apps.
I'm not on
No.
the apps, but it's, I'm not having issues with it. It comes in a lot because I'm open to it. And sometimes
Uh-huh.
it's right and sometimes it's not. And I don't get sore feelings if someone comes in and they're like, oh, you're actually different than what I thought you would be. That just means that they were projecting something onto me that I wasn't. And it's not a
Uh-huh.
reflection of myself. And that's been a big learning thing too, of like, somebody else's feelings towards you is not a reflection of who you are as a person. Sometimes I haven't done anything wrong. We just met and they're ghosting. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? No, it's a
Mm-hmm.
reflection of them. It's a reflection of where they're
Yeah.
at. Everyone's life is so complex in its own. If my life is as complex internally as well as it is, everyone is doing that at the same time. So I just don't take it personally anymore. It's out there, whatever's going to
Uh-huh.
work, even if it's not forever. But one day someone's going to choose me like I choose them. And I'm okay to work on myself and love my friends and love my sister and love my family and my dog until that point. In which case I will continue to love them. But it's, it's something it's additive. And I want it to be
Yeah.
additive rather than me force myself into it because I'm scared.
Yeah. And I love that. Okay. Well, this is my final thing. You have your photo of your younger self. Little
Yes.
mini Shanice. Um, well, maybe two things. How do you think she would feel about you now? And what is something you want to tell her?
I think she would be so proud of me. And I'm so proud of her, honestly. I always think about my younger self. I remember I think the reason I've ended up in the career that I'm in is because I was missing something as a kid, which was representation for the most part. And I was very determined to make sure that no one ever had to feel the way that I felt. And I continue to be determined to make sure that hopefully no one has to feel that way again. And I think representation is so important. And so I think she would be so proud of where we are and what we did. And it's, been a long time of spiraling upwards, I would say, and being scared, but, overcoming the fear. And I think that sometimes I get sad because my grandma used to call me a hurricane because of my energy. And she was like, you open your room and blow everyone away. And I lost that for a really long time. I feel like I lost also moving to LA is like tough. Moving to America is tough. Fighting for yourself in an industry is tough. And so I feel like I lost that and I got really scared. And I feel like I've recently regained it and I see myself in the mirror. I'll send you a photo after this, but it's like myself in the mirror and then it's my younger self on the mirror. And I'm just like, it's hard to recognize that it's the same person, but I think she would be really proud of how far we've come. And I always say, this is not, if there is a multiverse, this is not the version of reality where I quit. It's not. I always say my ancestors didn't survive so that I could be a quitter, so that I could back down. And my dad is very resilient in instilling that thought in us. And so I'm going to keep going. What was the second part of the question?
What would you like to tell her?
I think I just want to tell her it's going to be okay and that you are worthy and that you are loved and that you are lovable and that you are beautiful in your own way and that your value doesn't lie in what other people think of you. Like the light that my grandma saw, bless her, love her, wasn't coming from elsewhere. It was coming from inside of me. There's actually a quote from poet Langyev, and it says, "It's so dark right now, I can't see anything." And then there's a second part of the poem that says, "That's because the light's coming from you. You can't see it, but everyone else can." And I think that I hold on to that so much because I keep trying to tell my younger self that. Because I hold on to it now too. And when I forget, I'm like, it's so, as long as you're the light, it's never going to be dark. Anyway, that's how I feel.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.